Hey everyone, I'm Patricia and I'm 58 years old. I need to tell you about something that happened recently that completely changed how I see my family, and honestly, it's still hard to believe this actually happened to me. So, let me give you some background first. I've been divorced for about 12 years now. My ex-husband left me for his secretary. Classic story, right? But you know what? It was actually the best thing that ever happened to me, even though it didn't feel like it at the time. I have 2 daughters, Jessica, who's 32, and Amy, who's 29. Jessica is married to this guy named Tyler, and they have 2 kids, my precious grandbabies, Lily, who's 8, and Marcus, who's 5. Now I need you to understand something about my life. After the divorce, I worked my butt off to rebuild everything. I mean everything. I was a stay-at-home mom for most of my marriage, so when my world fell apart, I had to start over completely. I went back to school, got my real estate license, and spent the next decade building a successful business. I'm talking 60-hour weeks, missed dinners, sacrificed vacations, the whole 9 yards. But you know what kept me going? My girls. I wanted to make sure they never had to depend on anyone, the way I had to depend on their father. I wanted to give them security, opportunities, a safety net. So I saved every penny I could, invested wisely, and by the time I was in my mid-50s, I had built up a pretty decent nest egg. Jessica married Tyler about 6 years ago, and from the beginning, something about him rubbed me the wrong way. Don't get me wrong, he wasn't obviously terrible or anything like that. He was charming, good-looking, said all the right things. But there was something, I don't know, entitled about him, like he expected things to be handed to him. And here's the thing that really bothered me. He never seemed to appreciate what Jessica brought to the table. My daughter is incredible. She's a nurse, works at the children's hospital, and she's absolutely devoted to those kids. She also handles all the household stuff, takes care of Lily and Marcus, and somehow still finds time to help Tyler with his various business ventures. Oh, Tyler's business ventures. Let me tell you about those. In the 6 years I've known this man, he's had more business ideas than I can count. First, it was going to be a food truck. Then it was cryptocurrency trading. After that, it was some kind of online drop shipping thing. Then he wanted to flip houses, even though he'd never successfully flipped a pancake, let alone a house. But here's what really got to me. Every single time one of these ventures failed, it was never Tyler's fault. It was the market. It was bad timing. It was his partner screwing him over. It was the economy. Never once did I hear him take responsibility for anything. And my poor Jessica. She believed in him every single time. She'd work extra shifts at the hospital to cover their expenses while Tyler chased his next big dream. She'd smile and nod when he explained why this new idea was going to be the one. She'd even use her own savings to help fund his projects. It broke my heart to watch, but what could I do? She was an adult, she was married, and every time I tried to gently suggest that maybe Tyler should get a steady job while pursuing his entrepreneurial dreams, Jessica would get defensive. She'd say I didn't understand, that I wasn't being supportive, that Tyler just needed time to find his niche. So I bit my tongue. I smiled and nodded and kept my opinions to myself, even though it was killing me inside. Amy, my younger daughter, saw it too. She and I would talk about it sometimes, usually after family dinners, where Tyler would dominate the conversation with his latest scheme, while Jessica sat there looking exhausted from her 12-hour shift at the hospital. "Mom," Amy would say, "someone needs to tell Jessica that she's being taken advantage of." And I'd sigh and say, "She has to figure it out for herself, honey. If it comes from us, she'll just get defensive and it'll push her away." But wait. This is where things start to get really interesting, and trust me, you're not going to believe what happens next. About 8 months ago, Tyler came to me with what he called the opportunity of a lifetime. He wanted to start a landscaping business with his buddy from high school, some guy named Chris. According to Tyler, Chris had all this experience and connections, and Tyler was going to handle the business side of things. "Patricia," he said, and I hated how he called me Patricia instead of Mom. But that's another story. This is it. This is the big one. Chris already has 3 commercial contracts lined up, and we just need some startup capital to get the equipment and supplies. I should mention that Tyler had asked me for money before, small amounts here and there, a few $100s for marketing materials for his cryptocurrency thing, $1,000 to secure inventory for his dropshipping business. I always said no, and I always suggested he try the bank or find investors who weren't family members. But this time was different. This time Jessica was there too, and she looked hopeful. More hopeful than I'd seen her in years. "Mom," she said, "I really think this could work. Tyler's been researching the landscaping business for months, and Chris really does have experience. The profit margins are incredible, and there's so much demand in this area." I looked at my daughter's face, saw the exhaustion around her eyes from all those extra shifts, saw the hope she was trying so hard to hold on to, and I felt my resolve wavering. "How much are we talking about?" I asked, even though I knew I was making a mistake. Tyler's eyes lit up. $25,000, that's it. It'll cover a truck, the basic equipment, insurance, and enough operating capital to get through the first few months until the revenue starts flowing. $25,000. That was a significant chunk of my savings, but it wasn't going to put me in the poorhouse either. And the way Jessica was looking at me, "I'd need to see a business plan," I said. "Financial projections, market research, the works. And I'd want to meet this Chris person." "Absolutely," Tyler said, practically bouncing in his seat. "I'll have everything ready for you by next week." But here's where I should have paid attention to that little voice in my head, the one that was screaming that this was a bad idea, because the business plan Tyler showed me the following week was, well, let's just say it was optimistic. Very, very optimistic. The projected profits were astronomical. According to Tyler's calculations, they'd be making 6 figures within the first year. The market research consisted of driving around the neighborhood and counting how many houses had nice landscaping. And the competition analysis was basically, there's room for everyone. And Chris? Well, I never did meet Chris. Every time I asked to meet him, Tyler had some excuse. Chris was out of town. Chris was busy with his current job. Chris was dealing with family issues. Red flags were waving everywhere. But Jessica was so excited, so hopeful, and I wanted to believe that maybe this time would be different. Maybe Tyler really had found his calling. Maybe this was the thing that would finally allow my daughter to stop working those brutal double shifts and actually enjoy her life. So I said yes. I know. You're probably screaming at your screen right now, telling me I should have known better, and you're right. I should have. But sometimes when you love someone, you make stupid decisions because you want their dreams to come true, even when those dreams belong to someone who doesn't deserve them. The conversation where I agreed to lend them the money is burned into my memory. We were sitting in my living room, Tyler, Jessica, and me. I had my checkbook in my lap, and I looked Tyler straight in the eye. "This is a loan," I said very clearly. "Not a gift, not an investment, a loan. I expect to be paid back with interest, according to a payment schedule we're going to work out right now." Tyler nodded enthusiastically. "Of course, Patricia, of course. We wouldn't have it any other way." Jessica squeezed my hand. "Thank you, Mom. This means everything to us. We worked out a payment plan. They'd start paying me back in 6 months once the business was established. $500 a month until the principal and interest were paid off. It would take about 5 years, but that seemed reasonable given Tyler's projections. I wrote the check, and Tyler practically snatched it out of my hands. He gave me this big hug and kept saying, thank you, this is going to change everything." And you know what? He was right. It did change everything, just not in the way any of us expected. For the first few months, things seemed to be going well. Tyler would update me on their progress. They'd bought the truck, they'd gotten the equipment, They'd started working on their first few jobs. He even showed me some before and after pictures of a yard they'd landscaped, though. Looking back now, I'm not even sure those pictures were really from their work. Jessica seemed happier too. She was still working her regular shifts at the hospital, but she wasn't picking up as much overtime. She talked about how excited Tyler was, how motivated he seemed, how this was finally the thing that was going to work out for them. But then, well, let's just say that things started to get weird. About 4 months after I'd given them the money, I was having lunch with Amy, and she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "Have you seen Tyler's new car?" she asked casually. "What? New car?" I said. "That BMW he's been driving around. I saw him at the grocery store last week, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I guess the landscaping business is doing better than I thought. A BMW." Tyler was driving a BMW. Now, I'm no expert on landscaping businesses, but I was pretty sure that 4 months into starting a new company, you shouldn't be buying luxury cars, especially when you owe your mother-in-law $25,000. That night, I called Jessica. "Hey, honey," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "Amy mentioned that Tyler got a new car?" There was a pause. "Oh, yeah. It's actually used, not new. He needed something more reliable for the business, you know? The old car was breaking down all the time." "A BMW, though?" Another pause. "It was a really good deal, Mom, and he needed to look professional when meeting with potential clients." I wanted to say that a reliable Honda Civic would have been professional and a lot cheaper, but I bit my tongue. Instead, I asked the question I'd been wanting to ask for months. "How's the business doing, by the way? When do you think you'll be able to start making those payments we discussed?" "Oh," Jessica said, and I could hear the discomfort in her voice. "Actually, Tyler wanted to talk to you about that. The business is doing well, but they've had to reinvest everything back into expanding. You know how it is with new businesses. You have to spend money to make money. Spend money to make money." I'd heard Tyler say that phrase so many times over the years, usually right before one of his ventures collapsed. "That's fine," I said. "But we did agree on a timeline. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I do need to know when I can expect to start seeing some return on my investment." "I know, Mom, I know. Tyler's going to call you this week to work out a new schedule, okay?" But Tyler didn't call that week, or the next week, or the week after that. When I finally called Jessica again, she sounded stressed and exhausted. It more so than usual. "Is everything okay, honey?" I asked. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just busy with work and the kids. You know how it is." "What about the business? How are things going with Tyler's landscaping company?" There was a long silence. Then Jessica sighed. "Actually, Mom, there's been a setback. Chris decided to back out of the partnership, so Tyler's had to restructure everything." Chris backed out. The mysterious Chris, who I'd never met, who apparently had all the experience and connections, had just backed out. "What does that mean for the business?" I asked. "Tyler's figuring it out. He's talking to some other potential partners, looking at different options. It's just going to take a little longer to get everything back on track." A little longer. I was starting to hate that phrase. "And what about my loan?" I asked. "Tyler's going to call you," Jessica said quickly. "He's just been so busy trying to salvage the business situation, but he's going to call you this week, I promise." But again, Tyler didn't call. This pattern continued for another 2 months. Every time I asked Jessica about the business or the loan payments, she'd give me some vague explanation about setbacks and delays, and she'd promise that Tyler would call me to discuss it, but Tyler never called. And then something happened that made me realize just how deep this rabbit hole went. I was at the grocery store, and I ran into my neighbor Carol. Carol's husband works for the city's licensing department, and she mentioned something that stopped me dead in my tracks. "I heard Tyler's doing landscaping now," she said. "The Rick says he never pulled any business licenses. Isn't that strange? I mean, you need licenses for that kind of work, especially if you're doing commercial contracts." No business licenses. That night, I did something I probably should have done months earlier. I drove by the address Tyler had given me for the business. It was supposed to be a small office space where they stored equipment and met with clients. The address was a vacant lot, not an office building, not a warehouse. A vacant lot with a for sale sign that looked like it had been there for years. I sat in my car, staring at that empty lot, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt stupid, really, really stupid. But more than that, I felt betrayed, not just by Tyler. I'd never really trusted Tyler, but by Jessica. My own daughter had been lying to me for months, covering for her husband's lies, helping him string me along. The next morning, I called Jessica and asked her to come over. Alone. She showed up looking nervous, which told me she already knew why I wanted to see her. Jessica, I said, I need you to tell me the truth about Tyler's business. She started to give me the same song and dance about setbacks and delays, but I cut her off. Honey, I drove by the business address. There's nothing there. It's an empty lot. Jessica's face went white. She sat down heavily on my couch and put her head in her hands. Mom, I can explain. I'm listening. And that's when the real story came out. The story that made me so angry I could barely see straight. There never was a landscaping business. There never was a Chris. Tyler had taken my $25,000 and, well, you're not going to believe what he actually did with it. Jessica was crying now, ugly tears streaming down her face as she finally told me the truth. Mom, Tyler never intended to start a business. He used the money to pay off card debt. A lot of credit card debt. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. How much debt? Almost $30,000, she whispered. $30,000 in credit card debt. From what? I didn't even want to know, but Jessica kept talking through her tears. He'd been hiding it from me for years. Online gambling, crypto investments that went bad, some kind of day trading thing. I only found out about it 2 months after you gave us the money. He said he was going to use your loan to start the business and pay off the debt. But then he realized he needed all of it just to keep us from losing the house. Losing the house. My daughter's house, where my grandchildren lived, had been at risk because of Tyler's secret gambling and trading addictions, and I had unknowingly bailed him out. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Because I was ashamed. Because I knew you'd been right about him all along and I couldn't admit it. Because she looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Because I was scared you'd never trust me again. The irony was devastating. She'd been so afraid of losing my trust that she'd destroyed it completely. And the BMW? I asked quietly. Jessica winced. He bought that before I knew about the debt. It was part of his whole fake it till you make it mentality. He thought if he looked successful, he could somehow make it real. I sat there in stunned silence, processing everything. The lies, the deception, the way both of them had looked me in the eye for months and continued the charade. The way Jessica had defended him, made excuses for him, even when she knew the truth. Jessica, I said finally, you understand that I may never get that money back, right? $25,000 that I worked my ass off to save, that was supposed to be part of my retirement security, is just gone. She nodded miserably. Tyler says he's going to get a real job now. He's going to pay you back every penny, I swear, Tyler says. Even now, even after everything, she was still parroting Tyler's promises. That's when something clicked inside me. A kind of cold clarity that I'd never felt before. I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, intelligent, hard-working daughter, who had been reduced to making excuses for a man who had stolen from her own mother. And I realized that enough was enough. Jessica, I said, and my voice was calmer than I felt, I want you to listen to me very carefully. This isn't just about the money anymore. This is about respect. This is about honesty. This is about the fact that you chose to protect Tyler's Lies instead of protecting our relationship, she started to protest, but I held up my hand. I'm not done. You and Tyler came to me together asking for this loan. You both looked me in the eye and promised it would be paid back. You both participated in this deception for months. So as far as I'm concerned, you're both equally responsible. Jessica's face went pale again. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying that I need some time to think about what this means for our family, for our relationship, for a lot of things. I stood up, which was my signal that the conversation was over. Jessica stood too, looking panicked. Mom, please don't let this come between us. I know we screwed up, but we're family. We can work through this. Family. The word that had been used to manipulate me into giving them the money in the first place. Jessica, I said as I walked her to the door. Family doesn't lie to each other for 8 months. Family doesn't steal from each other. And family sure as hell doesn't use children as emotional leverage to get what they want. She turned back to look at me, confused. What do you mean about the children? Every time I had doubts about giving you that money, you'd mention Lily and Marcus, how this business was going to provide for their future, how Tyler was doing it for them. You used my love for my grandchildren to manipulate me into trusting Tyler. The look of realization on Jessica's face told me she knew I was right. I didn't mean to, she started, but you did. And now I need to figure out what to do with that. After Jessica left, I sat in my living room for hours, staring at the wall and trying to process everything. The betrayal, the lies, the money, all of it swirled together in my head until I felt dizzy. But slowly, underneath all the hurt and anger, something else started to emerge, a kind of steely determination that surprised me. I wasn't going to be a victim in this story. I wasn't going to just write off $25,000 and pretend it didn't matter. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let Tyler think he could manipulate and steal from my family without consequences. That night, I called Amy and told her everything. Her reaction was, well, let's just say Amy has never been one to mince words. I'm going to kill him, she said. I'm literally going to kill Tyler. Get in line, I said grimly. Mom, what are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? I thought about it for days. I researched my legal options. Fraud, theft, breach of contract. I could probably take them to court, but that would be expensive and time-consuming, and there was no guarantee I'd ever see a penny of my money. I thought about just cutting them off completely. No more family dinners, no more help with the grandkids, no more relationship with Jessica until she came to her senses and left Tyler. But then I remembered something Tyler had told me months ago, back when he was still pretending the business was real. He'd mentioned that he and Jessica were planning to ask me to help them with a down payment on a bigger house. They wanted to move to a better school district for the kids. And that's when the perfect plan started to form in my mind. But that's what I have to pause for now, because what comes next is going to blow your mind. I mean it. You think you know where this story is going, but trust me, you have no idea. When I found out what Tyler really did with my money, and how Jessica had been covering for him all this time, it changed everything. Not just between Tyler and me, but between Jessica and me, and ultimately, it changed the entire dynamic of our family. But here's a hint about what's coming. Remember that comment I made to Jessica about considering the money in advance on her inheritance? Well, let's just say that conversation didn't go the way she expected it to. So where was I? Oh, right. I was telling you about how I discovered Tyler's perfect plan for revenge. And let me tell you, when this idea hit me, I actually smiled for the first time in weeks. See, Tyler had mentioned wanting to ask me for help with a down payment on a bigger house. And I just knew, that conversation was coming soon, especially now that they thought they'd gotten away with stealing $25,000 from me. But here's what Tyler didn't know. I'm not just some naive old lady he could manipulate forever. I spent over a decade building a successful real estate business. I know how to read people, I know how to make deals, and most importantly, I know how to protect myself. So I waited. And sure enough, about 2 weeks after my devastating conversation with Jessica, Tyler finally called me. "Hey, Patricia," he said in that fake, cheerful voice he used when he wanted something. "I hope you're doing well. Listen, I was wondering if we could get together for coffee sometime soon. Jessica and I have some exciting news to share with you." "Exciting? News? Right. Of course, Tyler," I said sweetly. "How about this Saturday? We can meet at that little cafe downtown." "Perfect. See you then." I spent the rest of that week preparing. And when I say preparing, I mean I did my homework. I looked up Tyler's credit history. Turns out when you co-sign for someone's business loan application, you get access to all sorts of interesting information. I researched the gambling sites he'd been using. I even hired a private investigator to get me a complete picture of his financial situation. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. The $30,000 in credit card debt that Jessica had mentioned, that was just the tip of the iceberg. Tyler owed money to at least 6 different creditors, had multiple unpaid loans, and had been dodging collection agencies for months. But here's the really interesting part. His credit was so bad that there was no way he was going to qualify for a mortgage on his own, which meant that if he wanted that bigger house, he was going to need someone with good credit to co-sign for him, someone like me. Saturday came and I met Tyler at the cafe. He showed up looking, well, he looked good. New clothes, fresh haircut, even a new watch. Apparently, my $25,000 had funded quite the makeover. "Patricia, you look great," he said, giving me one of his signature charming smiles. "Thank you, Tyler. You look pretty good yourself." "New watch?" He glanced down at his wrist and had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "Oh, this old thing. I've had it for ages." Liar. I could see the price tag reflection still on the face. We ordered our coffee, and Tyler launched into his usual small talk. How were the kids? How was work? Wasn't the weather nice? All the while, I just sat there smiling and nodding, waiting for him to get to the real reason we were there. Finally, after about 20 minutes of pointless chatter, Tyler cleared his throat. "So, Patricia, Jessica and I have been talking, and we found this amazing house in the Riverside School District. You know how important good schools are for Lily and Marcus." There it was, using the kids again. "Oh, how wonderful," I said. "Tell me about it." Tyler's eyes lit up as he pulled out his phone to show me pictures. "It's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath colonial with a huge backyard. The kids would each have their own room, and there's even a home office where I could work on my business ventures." Business ventures. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. "It sounds perfect," I said. "What's the asking price?" "Well, that's the thing," Tyler said, suddenly looking a little less confident. "It's $420,000, which is a stretch for us right now. We'd need about $60,000 for the down payment, plus closing costs." $60,000? This man had stolen $25,000 from me just months ago, and now he wanted $60,000 more. "That's a lot of money, Tyler," I said carefully. I know. But here's the thing. Jessica and I have been talking about our long-term financial planning, and we realized that this house would be a great investment. Property values in that area are going up like crazy." He leaned forward, getting excited now. "And we were thinking, well, we were hoping, that maybe you'd consider helping us out. Not as a loan this time, but more like an early inheritance for Jessica. You know, something that would benefit the whole family, an early inheritance." The audacity was breathtaking. "Interesting idea," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "And what about the landscaping business? How are things going with that?" Tyler's face fell slightly. "Well, actually, we've had some setbacks with that. The partnership with Chris didn't work out the way we hoped, and we're kind of regrouping right now." "I see. And the loan I gave you, for that business?" Now Tyler looked really uncomfortable. Yeah, about that. Jessica and I have been meaning to call you. We're going to need a little more time before we can start making payments. The business situation got complicated and we had some unexpected expenses. Unexpected expenses, like a BMW and a new wardrobe. Tyler, I said, and something in my tone made him stop talking. I need to ask you something, and I want you to look me in the eye when you answer. He nodded nervously. Is there actually a landscaping business? The color drained from his face. For a moment, he looked like he was going to try to keep up the lie, but something in my expression must have told him the game was over. Patricia, I can explain. Is there a landscaping business? Tyler, yes or no? No, he whispered. Has there ever been a landscaping business? No. Is there a Chris? No. I sat back in my chair and looked at this man who had lied to me for 8 months, who had stolen my money, who had manipulated my daughter into covering for him, and who was now sitting across from me asking for $60,000 more. Tyler, I said calmly, what did you do with my $25,000? He started crying. Right there in the cafe, this grown man started crying like a child who'd been caught stealing cookies. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. I had debts, gambling debts, and I was going to lose everything. The house, Jessica, the kids. I panicked. So you decided to steal from me instead. It wasn't supposed to be stealing. I was going to pay it back, I swear. I had this system, this trading strategy that was supposed to work. You used my money to gamble more. No. Well, not all of it. Most of it went to pay off the credit cards, but I thought if I could just make some quick returns with the rest. I felt that cold clarity wash over me again. This man was never going to change. He was never going to take responsibility. He was never going to pay me back. And worst of all, he was dragging my daughter and grandchildren down with him. Tyler, I said, I want you to listen to me very carefully. He looked up at me with red, watery eyes. You stole $25,000 from me. You lied to me for 8 months. You manipulated my daughter into covering for you. And now you have the unbelievable nerve to ask me for $60,000 more. Patricia, please. I'm not finished. You want to talk about Jessica's inheritance? Let's talk about it. Because of what you've done, I've decided to make some changes to my will. Tyler went very still. Jessica was going to inherit half of my estate when I die. Amy was going to get the other half. But you know what? I've decided that the $25,000 you stole from me is going to be considered an advance on Jessica's inheritance. What does that mean? Tyler asked, though I could tell he already knew. It means that when I die, Amy will inherit my entire estate. Jessica will get nothing because she already got her share, the share you stole and gambled away. Tyler's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You can't do that. Jessica didn't know. Jessica knew for months and helped you. Lie to me. Jessica chose to protect you instead of protecting our relationship. Jessica made her choice, and now I'm making mine. I stood up to leave, but Tyler grabbed my arm. Wait, please. What about the kids? What about Lily and Marcus? You can't punish them for my mistakes. And that's when I delivered the line that I'd been saving for this exact moment. You're absolutely right, Tyler. The children shouldn't suffer for your mistakes, which is why I'm setting up education funds for both Lily and Marcus. Funds that you and Jessica will never have access to. The money will go directly to their schools and colleges, ensuring that your gambling addiction can never touch their futures. Tyler let go of my arm like I'd burned him. But as for that house you want, that early inheritance you're asking for, here's what's going to happen instead. You're going to get a real job, not another get-rich-quick scheme, not another business, venture, but a real job with a steady paycheck. You're going to pay me back every penny of my $25,000 with interest. And if you ever lie to me again, if you ever try to manipulate me or my family again, I will make sure that everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you really are. I leaned down so I was eye level with him. I built my real estate business in this town, Tyler. I know everyone. I have connections you can't even imagine. Cross me again, and I will make sure you never get another loan, another job, or another chance in this community. Do you understand me? Tyler nodded frantically. Good. Now, I suggest you go home and have a very honest conversation with my daughter about your future together. Because let me tell you something. Jessica is smart. She's capable. And she deserves so much better than this. If she's smart, she'll realize that soon. I walked out of that cafe feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt like I had some control over the situation. But you know what? The story doesn't end there, because Tyler and Jessica's reaction to my ultimatum was, well, let's just say it was even more dramatic than I expected. That evening, Jessica called me, and she was furious. Mom, how could you do this to us? How could you threaten to cut me out of your will over money? Jessica, I said calmly, I didn't threaten anything. I simply explained the consequences of your choices. My choices? Mom, I made one mistake. You made months of mistakes, Jessica. You chose to lie to me every single day for 8 months. You chose to help Tyler deceive me. You chose to let me worry about my missing money while you knew exactly where it went. I was trying to protect our family. You were trying to protect Tyler. There's a difference. Jessica was crying now. So that's it? You're just going to throw away our relationship over this? I'm not throwing anything away, honey. But I'm also not going to pretend that what you and Tyler did was okay. Actions have consequences. What about the grandkids? You're going to let them suffer because you're mad at Tyler. The kids will be fine. In fact, they're going to be better than fine, because I'm making sure their education is protected from Tyler's poor decisions. But you and Tyler need to figure out how to stand on your own feet. There was a long silence. Then Jessica said something that broke my heart. You know what, Mom? Maybe you're right. Maybe Tyler and I do need to figure things out on our own. But if that's how you want it, then that's how it'll be. Don't expect to see us at family dinners anymore. Don't expect to see the kids every weekend. If you want to choose money over family, then live with that choice. And she hung up on me. I won't lie to you. That hurt. It hurt more than the money, more than the lies, more than everything else combined. Because despite everything Tyler had done, Jessica was my daughter and I loved her. But I also knew that sometimes, when someone you love is making destructive choices, the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling them. Amy, on the other hand, was completely supportive. Mom, you did the right thing, she said when I called her that night. Jessica needed to hear this. Tyler needed to hear this. Maybe now they'll actually face reality. But what if she really does cut me off from the kids? I asked. She won't, Amy said confidently. Jessica loves you too much, and she knows the kids need their grandmother. She's just angry right now. Give her time. Amy was right, but it took longer than either of us expected. For 2 whole months, I didn't hear from Jessica or Tyler. I didn't see my grandchildren. I didn't get any updates on whether Tyler had gotten a job or whether they were working on paying me back. It was the longest 2 months of my life. But then on a Tuesday evening in late October, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Jessica standing there looking exhausted and defeated. Mom, she said, can we talk? I let her in, and we sat in my living room. The same room where she'd confessed Tyler's lies months earlier. Tyler got a job, she said, without preamble. He's working at a construction company. Manual labor, 40 hours a week, steady pay. That's good, I said carefully. He's also started going to Gamblers Anonymous, 3 meetings a week. That was better than good. That was progress. And we've been to a financial counselor. We've set up a payment plan for your money. $200 a month until it's paid off. It's not as much as we originally planned, but it's what we can afford right now. $200 a month would take over 10 years to pay off. The principal, never mind interest. But it was something. Jessica, I said, why are you telling me this? She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Because you were right. About everything. Tyler was using me. He was using you. He was using the kids. And I was so afraid of admitting that my marriage was a mistake that I became part of the problem. What are you saying? I'm saying that I filed for separation last week. I felt my heart skip a beat. Oh, honey. The kids and I are staying in the house for now, but Tyler moved in with his brother. We're going to try counseling, see if we can work things out, but... She shrugged helplessly. I don't know if we can come back from this. I reached over and took her hand. I'm sorry it came to this. Are you? Because sometimes I think you wanted this to happen. That stung, because there was some truth to it. I had wanted Jessica to see Tyler for who he really was, but I hadn't wanted her to go through the pain of a separation, the difficulty of being a single mother, the upheaval for my grandchildren. Jessica, I never wanted you to be hurt, but I also couldn't watch you destroy your life for someone who didn't deserve your loyalty. She nodded slowly. I know. And I'm not saying you were wrong to do what you did, but it still hurts. I know it does. We sat in silence for a while. Then Jessica asked the question I'd been dreading. Mom, what about your will? Are you really going to leave everything to Amy? I took a deep breath. That depends. On what? On whether you can rebuild the trust that was broken. On whether you can show me that you've learned from this. On whether our relationship can be about more than just Tyler's problems. Jessica considered this. And what about Tyler paying you back? What about it? If he pays back every penny, will that change things? I thought about it. It would be a good start. But Jessica, this was never really about the money. It was about honesty. It was about respect. It was about the fact that you chose to protect someone who was hurting our family. I know, she whispered. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That was the beginning of our reconciliation. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. But slowly, over the following months, Jessica and I started rebuilding our relationship. Tyler did keep his job at the construction company. He did continue going to Gamblers Anonymous, and he did start making those monthly payments, $200 every month, like clockwork. The separation lasted 6 months. Then Jessica and Tyler started marriage counseling. It was messy, it was difficult, and there were a lot of setbacks. But gradually, they started working through their issues. Tyler had to face some hard truths about himself. He had to admit that he'd been living in a fantasy world, chasing get-rich-quick schemes instead of taking responsibility for his family. He had to acknowledge the damage his gambling addiction had done, not just financially, but emotionally. Jessica had to face some hard truths, too. She had to admit that she'd been enabling Tyler's behavior, making excuses for him, protecting him from consequences that he needed to face. As for me, I had to face the truth that sometimes, when you love someone, you have to be willing to risk the relationship in order to save it. It's been a year now since that confrontation in the cafe. Tyler has paid back about $3,400 of the money he owes me. At this rate, he'll have it all paid off sometime around 2065. But you know what? He hasn't missed a single payment. He's also been promoted at the construction company. Turns out that when Tyler actually applies himself to something real, instead of chasing fantasies, he's quite capable. Jessica and Tyler are still together, still in counseling, still working on their marriage. The kids are doing well. Lily's in 4th grade now and Marcus is in 1st, and they're both thriving in school. And my will? Well, let's just say I've made some revisions. Jessica is back in it, though her inheritance is reduced by the amount Tyler stole, plus interest. I figure by the time I die, he'll have either paid it all back or he won't have, and my will reflects that reality. The education funds for Lily and Marcus are growing nicely, and I've made sure they're completely protected from any future poor decisions their parents might make. As for that house in the Riverside School District, Tyler and Jessica never did buy it. They realized they couldn't afford it, not with all their debt and their damaged credit. But you know what? The kids are doing just fine in their current schools, and the family is learning to live within their means. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd just written off that $25,000, if I'd kept quiet about being deceived, if I'd continued to enable Tyler's behavior for the sake of keeping peace in the family. I think Jessica would still be working double shifts to cover Tyler's gambling debts. I think Tyler would still be chasing his next big scheme instead of building real skills and real income. I think my grandchildren would have grown up watching their father lie and their mother make excuses for him. Instead, they're growing up watching their father take responsibility for his mistakes and work hard to fix them. They're watching their mother set boundaries and demand respect. They're learning that actions have consequences, but also that people can change if they're willing to do the work. Was it worth risking my relationship with Jessica to teach these lessons? Was it worth the 2 months of not seeing my grandchildren? Was it worth being seen as the mean grandmother who chose money over family? Absolutely. Because here's what I learned through all of this. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive behavior. Sometimes you have to be willing to be the bad guy in order to help the people you love become better versions of themselves. And sometimes, when someone steals from you and lies to you and manipulates you, the best response isn't to just forgive and forget. Sometimes the best response is to show them that their actions have real consequences and that you're not going to be anyone's victim. Tyler learned that I'm not just some naive old lady he can take advantage of. Jessica learned that loyalty has to go both ways, and that protecting someone who's hurting the family isn't actually protecting the family at all. As for me, I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I learned that I can set boundaries and stick to them, even when it's painful. I learned that sometimes being kind means being tough, and I learned that my $25,000, while I'd obviously prefer to have it back in my bank account, might have been the best investment I ever made, not in Tyler's fictional business, but in my family's future. So that's my story. The story of how my son-in-law tried to steal from me, how my daughter chose to protect him instead of me, and how I decided I wasn't going to be anyone's victim. These days, Tyler calls me Mom instead of Patricia. He looks me in the eye when he hands me those monthly payments. He asks my advice about work, about money, about how to be a better husband and father. Jessica and I have coffee together every week, just the two of us, talking about everything except Tyler's problems. We're rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honesty instead of secrecy. And my grandchildren, they think their grandma Patricia is the strongest, smartest woman in the world, which, after everything I've been through, I'm starting to believe might actually be true. The moral of the story? Don't mess with a woman who's built her own success from scratch. And definitely don't try to steal from her and think she won't. Notice, because trust me, she will notice, she will remember, and she will make sure you face the consequences of your choices. And that, my friends, is how you turn being a victim into being a victor.